Brexit. Leaving the European Union to be by ourselves. Improved sovereignty. Hello and welcome to another English podcast with Paul, where we speak unscripted, natural, native English, where we just talk about the topics that you suggest or that I find interesting in a natural conversational way or even debate. So if you've got jobs to do, if you're in the car, crank up the radio, put in your headphones, and let's dive in. Brexit. Okay, so Brexit. For those that don't know, they've taken the word Britain and exit the European Union. Okay, they've taken the two words and they smushed them together. So we have the word Brexit. Not very inspirational, not very exciting. But there we go. That's the word we have, Brexit. Okay, so I do have some notes, all right, not a script, but some notes just to help me out with some dates. 23rd of June, 2016. That is when the UK voted. So how do we get to this? How do we get to this? So politicians in our country often play games, game playing for maneuverability and to increase their status. There's one particular that stands out that came to the forefront with UKIP, UK Independence Party. This guy called Nigel Farage, not very charismatic, not very intelligent, not very interesting. He, along with a lot of other politicians, jumped on a small bandwagon. All right, they followed a small trend. They got involved with a small amount of people that wanted to amplify their voice. And this group of people wanted to leave the European Union for a few reasons, such as sovereignty, immigration, economy, and anti-establishment politics, as well as a few other things. The results of the referendum was 51.8% votes for leaving or in favor of leaving the European Union. So Nigel Farage and all the other MPs were pushing and pushing and pushing the Prime Minister to give a referendum to the people. And obviously there was a lot of power and a lot of influence from these 100 plus MPs that were pushing the Prime Minister for this referendum. The Prime Minister didn't agree with leaving the EU, along with most of the UK. Unfortunately, as I said, some of this game playing helps shed the light on some of these politicians that are normally left in the shadows. These politicians were on the media because media is about selling newspapers, eyes on the paper, making money, selling advertising. So many politicians got a voice. They became in the paper, they were interviewed, and they had lots of opportunities to spout their propaganda. And I use that word sparingly, propaganda, because in my opinion, and from what a lot of people have learned since, that the big reasons for leaving the European Union are mostly unfathomed, are unevidenced. And as it's coming to light, we believe that some of those claims were false and misleading. Many people were believed because of lots and lots of media coverage. So many people believed that the European Union was costing the British taxpayer lots and lots and lots of money, and that we were getting a bum deal. We were getting a bad deal. We were losing our sovereignty, our independence or traditions and ability to make our own choices and govern ourselves. So many people were really jumping on this bandwagon, especially those people that felt they didn't have a voice. A little bit like other historical government issues happening in other countries. You could say this was a little bit similar to Donald Trump being elected. So these MPs, they pushed and pushed for this referendum. I've told you the outcome. It was 51%, 51.8% in favor of leaving. So like I said before, I didn't choose to vote. I didn't vote for leaving. I wanted to remain. Many people that were able to see the benefits of the European Union wanted to remain. Unfortunately, lots and lots of people were disparaged by the current government and the current systems, and were led to believe that a lot of the problems were because of the European Union. Okay, so what are some of the... So, like I said, it happened in 2016. It's taken like 4 years to happen, 4 years to go through, maybe a bit more, maybe 5 years. So it's taken a long time. Obviously, there's lots and lots of bureaucracy, signing papers, agreements. And a lot of these agreements to come out of the European Union are because of agreements we've made, promises we've made to pay. So we have to fulfill our obligations. We've made lots of obligations to help this or that or any other parts of the European funds. Like I said, there was a lot of money going to Europe, and we even had a bus. One of our prime ministers, Boris Johnson, how he kind of snowballed the whole thing. He jumped on the bandwagon and he got involved along with Nigel Farage, and they really pushed it to the public that European Union was making a lot of money out of us and giving us a raw deal. So this elevated Nigel Farage, and it pushed the politician Boris Johnson right to the forefront. And you know, eventually he got elected to finish it off. But in the meantime, there was Theresa May, and Theresa May had a very difficult job of sorting out a lot of the issues, sorting out a lot of the problems. And we had a few other incidents in between. So it was a very difficult and hard time. People didn't know what was happening. The government weren't sure themselves. We were looking for a deal. We didn't want a no Brexit deal. So there was lots of things going on in the news about whether we were able to I want to say thrash out, that's the word, thrash out a deal between European Union and the UK. And this went on for many months, even years. So even what we've got now isn't perfect, but it's one thing. It's something. Right, okay. So many people now have been asked whether they think Brexit was a good thing or a bad thing. Many of the polls and the surveys have stated that most people think it was a bad thing and that the country had lost a lot of money. This was anticipated. The country anticipated we would lose some trade and we would lose some money. But nobody really foresaw how bad it would be. So right now, living in the UK, there is a huge labour shortage. From lorry drivers to we call them maids in hospitality industry. Many people that were making up a good chunk of our workforce on the side of labor, physical labor, have moved. Often many of them have gone back to their original countries. So there's a big shortfall. And that, as well as a lot of other things, really put pressure on households and families because prices were going up. So let's take, for example, lack of lorry drivers. Lack of lorry drivers meant that food wasn't being delivered from the distribution hubs and the farms to the supermarkets. So for a while we had some empty supermarkets, which induced a little bit of panic, with many people panic buying. Even now you can only buy a limited number of produce in some supermarkets. So that had a knock-on effect. Also, prices went up in cafes and in other parts of hospitality, hotels, things like this, because there wasn't the staff. So because there's not the staff, not the labor, they have to increase the prices to encourage people to change industries or to change where they're currently working to work for them in those industries. But there were many industries that had that same philosophy. It was good in that wages went up, but not so good in that prices of food went up, prices of activities went up because of lack of labor, physical labor shortages. So that was one big knock-on effect. There were a few others. Let me have a quick look here. So like I said, nobody had realized the impact. Also, trade with Europe obviously significantly dropped off. There then became a huge amount of bureaucracy regarding the trade in regards to paperwork. And those people that had fresh produce had a very difficult time, lost money, lost their produce because they were at the port. They were told they need this paperwork and that paperwork, and then they needed something else. And so there was a lot of confusion over what was all the necessary forms and paperwork to get through the border control in the UK and on the other side in Europe, most notoriously for us, for France. Generally, we have a really good relationship with France. France is our friend. We've done the tunnel together. We dug the Euro tunnel together. We even built the most iconic airplane in the world, the Concorde, together. So France is our ally. France is our friend. Unfortunately, France is the gateway for many of the trade from the UK into Europe. So that caused a little bit of, well, a lot of problems with all this paperwork and bureaucracy. So that had an impact on the economy as well. On top of that, investors. Some investors were hesitant because they didn't know what was going to happen to the Great British Pound, sterling pound. That fluctuated, that dropped for quite some time. It is now slowly, steadily rising again, but that did cause a lot of worry for many, many people. Okay, what else have we got? I said about investments. We said businesses, the bureaucracy and red tape that faced businesses was at a record high. And our overall economic performance is actually worse today than what it was before the referendum in 2016. Okay, what else we got here? So other things that were affected by it was Northern Ireland Agreement and Gibraltar. So Gibraltar is part of the UK and was on the news. They wanted to stay part of the European Union because Gibraltar is right next door to Spain. They share a land with Spain and they're miles away from the UK, but they're still part of the UK, an enclave or whatever. So they had a big time of uncertainty. It was very difficult and troubling for people in Gibraltar. And I imagine now the crossing every day. Many people used to live in Spain, cross over into Gibraltar and work in Gibraltar. And many English people live in Spain and cross over to work in Gibraltar. Because Gibraltar is like a tax haven. Gibraltar is very expensive to live. But just across the road is Spain, which is very cheap to live. So that makes sense. So like I said, there was a lot of uncertainty and worry, and probably even now there's issues and concerns with crossing the border on a regular basis. Bureaucracy. Okay. There was a lot of deadlocks apparently in regards to the negotiations with dealing with these agreements and obligations that we previously had. So that caused a long delay and a lot of problems. What else have we got here? So the UK is said to be 5% poorer, having less money than what we were before. And I would agree, yeah, that there has been a lot of changes, not just labour market, but prices have changed. The country's been a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty. And on top of that, we had Brexit. Listen to me. On top of that, we had COVID. So COVID also threw a spanner in the works. COVID was a real big problem for everybody around the world. So really, people are thinking about a recession should be looming, because the COVID hit a lot of businesses very hard. We were lucky that the government helped many businesses and many households. But that came at a cost to the government and the economy, which is now part of the reason why we have high interest rates. But because we come out of COVID, people are wanting to spend. People are wanting to go on holiday. We've been so done up with belt and braces and drawn in the purse strings that now people want to spend that money that they've been holding on to. But it's pushed the economy up. So to stop the economy driving up so fast, they're forcing up inflation to curb that spending. So it is a big balancing act, and we are still not sure whether we're going to go into recession. There's a lot of things going on at the moment. And like I said, COVID happened all over the world. We were just lucky that the government were able to buffer some of those problems and some of those financial issues for us. Much of the world was not so lucky. I lived in Cambodia for a while, and many people in Cambodia and other parts of Asia really struggled with tourism, because that, as you know, was just wiped out. There was no tourism at all. Many countries were completely locked down for months, even years. So tourism really closed a lot of businesses and really put a lot of people into hardship. And I'm not saying that the UK is hit the hardest. By a long shot, it wasn't. There are many people that suffered very, very deeply because of COVID. And we could only learn from it, pick ourselves up and use that as a lesson. All right, okay, moving on. Are we happy with the outcome? Well, a lot of people that are surveyed have said no, they're not happy with the outcome. There's been a huge cost. Many people have felt the costs at home now, and they really feel that they've been lied to by the politicians. So that's another lesson to be learned about politicians. You know, it's a game. There's not a lot of comeback either. There's not a lot of, I can't think of the right word. There's not a lot of justice for those politicians that did try to deceive us. You know, now they are further up their career ladder and making more money and more famous. They can earn more money for themselves. But everyday people like you and I are more and more out of pocket, whereas they're earning more and more. Don't get me started. Okay, going back to Gibraltar, they also suffered, along with Northern Ireland. So Northern Ireland was one of the really big problems in negotiations with the EU, because Northern Ireland has a peace treaty with the UK and between the Protestants and the Catholics. So Southern Ireland is still in the EU and is separate. Northern Ireland has now what they call a soft border, and that is in the sea. So anything going from the UK that has already had the paperwork organised and meets the criteria of ordinary trade passages between the UK and Northern Ireland can still go through with no problem. So anything going into Northern Ireland is fine. If there's anything going into Northern Ireland that is due to go onward travel further into the EU, then would be faced by tariffs and further paperwork and bureaucracy and red tape. So the soft border in the middle that has been agreed on at the moment. I think that was a big headache for a lot of people because this peace treaty and the troubles in Northern Ireland is a real serious issue that nobody wanted to open up again. This can of worms, they didn't want to open that up again. It's very important that we keep this peace in Northern Ireland. So eventually coming to this soft border seems to be working at the moment. I'm not in touch with people in Northern Ireland, but from what I understand and from what I've read and listened to, it seems to be working so far. But we'll see. All right, okay. Okay, so right, let's have a look at some of the positive effects. All right, we mentioned some of the negative effects. Let's look at some of the positive effects. Now it's all sort of moved forwards and people are getting on with their lives. Some of the positive effects. Right. So apparently we're able to have a stronger economic future where we're able to control our agricultural policy. According to some statistics, that was 38% of the EU budget, cost around 58 billion, mostly in subsidies and to rich landowners. I don't know the whole story there, but that's one thing. Ending of free movement and taking back control of our borders. Well, that's one of the areas that I disagreed with. I like the free movement and it really helped our labour shortage. So that's a whole issue there. Right. Restored democratic control over our lawmaking. So obviously the EU had a lot of input and say regards to our judicial system. I think things that went up through the courts ended up having going to European courts, which again took a lot longer and was more bureaucracy and taken out of our hands. So I think many people are happy that the law now stops within the UK. I'm not so sure. The Supreme Court, final arbiter for the UK laws. Yeah, I kind of mentioned that. Acceptance of ID cards for European nationals travelling to the UK. So we in the UK do not carry identity cards. If we're going abroad, we take our passport. But on a day-to-day basis, we do not need to carry any identification. Okay, we are free individual citizens that can go about our work, our peace, our day without any interruptions. Unless the police decide that there is good reason to stop us and ask us. Okay. So another aspect was our waters. There's always been contention with France, with ourselves and other countries with the fishing rights surrounding the UK waters. Personally, I think fishing rights are a very contentious issue. Everybody's always going to be unsatisfied with what they're allowed to fish, how much they're allowed to fish, where they can fish. I really don't know enough about it to be able to give a concise opinion. It's very difficult and it's very personal to different cultures, different regions, different people's livelihoods. And I don't feel qualified to be able to talk about that at all. But I do know it affects a lot of people. All right. Another issue was our own tariffs and regimes for the rest of the global trade. Again, it's a very big area, trade with the rest of the world. I don't think was the biggest part of our economy, the biggest part of our GDP. But again, it's another aspect. Okay, so there was a few more notes I made. This then does, coming out of Brexit, does allow for us to make our own deals. And this was, like I said, propaganda spouted to us many times. Oh, we could make a deal with this Trans-Siberian issue, or we can make deals with this country or that country or this Pacific country. That was shouted out a lot, and that we could make lots of money. But it doesn't take a brain surgeon to realize our closest partners for trade and our longest partners with trade is Europe. The European Union is right next door to us. And obviously they have a lot of very similar culture to us. And over the decades, we have built relationships and habits with the European Union. So I think trade with the European Union would have been better if we'd stayed with them. So now we have all these options, allegedly options, to have trade with other parts of the world. A few different types have been spouted and talked about. But I think currently they're now talking about the CPTPP. Something to do with the Pacific Trade Agreement. I don't know. There's lots of countries involved, like Australia and Japan. So that is a really big deal at the moment. They're talking about that a lot. Will it come to anything? I don't know. It is a little bit confusing. We don't know the ins and outs of it. But obviously you've still got a lot of transportation costs if we're transporting our goods to Canada. Who knows? Who knows? Right. So currently the pound is picking up. The sterling, the pound is picking up. Currently we are getting more deals. Currently we are getting some more investment into the UK. Things are looking up and things are looking brighter, especially now when we look back at things that are going on in the European Union now, such as some of the troubles in France, some of the issues in Germany, and many of the other countries that are not financially supporting equally in a balanced way. It seems to be very heavily supported by France and Germany. So hopefully it will get stronger. I hope it does. But it is teetering on the edge, I would say, at the moment. And it looks, and obviously this is a biased opinion of mine because I'm living in the UK and I'm a UK citizen. So I'm aware this is a biased opinion. Hopefully I've been able to have an open mind and look at news and resources and data and statistics from multiple sources to get a balanced view. That is my hope. You can be the judge. So to me, it looks like UK is standing on its own 2 feet now and on its way to making good relations with other trade deals. Because one of the biggest factors that we've not spoken about and that doesn't get mentioned is that the UK doesn't rely solely on its production, unlike other countries. It doesn't solely rely on agriculture. The biggest industry in the UK is financial services. I don't know why that's the biggest sector, but that seems to make the most money. And that, I believe, has propped up the UK GDP, the UK economy. The financial sector, maybe the technology sector, there seems to be a lot of good creation and creativity within the UK. And one of our benefits is that naturally we speak English. So if we want to trade our ideas, our inventions and technologies with other countries, such as America, Australia, New Zealand, it becomes a lot easier. So that's one aspect. So the future is bright, the future looks good, and I feel confident that the UK is doing quite well. and maybe have some other good trade alliances in the future. So that's my conclusion. That's my conclusion. If you have any comments, mention it below. If you want to reach out to me with some comments, message me on the website. And I hope to speak to you and see you in the next one. Be good, stay safe, and remember, always make it fun. Keep learning English. Always make it fun. See you next time. Bye for now. Bye-bye.